I never thought an ordinary family birthday could turn my whole life upside down. My grandmother was turning 80, and our entire extended family had gathered at her house. You know, the kind of house where every corner holds decades of memories, the smell of old wood, and faint perfume of flowers she'd planted years ago. I remember thinking how calm everything felt, how nothing seemed out of place, until she handed me the family tree. It was old, yellowed paper, edges curled like it had been tucked away in a drawer for decades. She smiled at me, eyes twinkling, and said, "I found this in your grandfather's old things. Thought you might like to see your roots." I took it, casually at first, not expecting anything unusual. Then my fiancé, Michael, leaned over my shoulder. His eyes went wide and he whispered, "Wait, look at these dates." I glanced at him, trying to understand what he meant. That's when I noticed it. My parents had listed a daughter, but the dates didn't add up. She was supposedly born the same day as me. The thought hit me like a punch to the stomach. A twin. My parents had been hiding a twin from me. All these years I had thought I was the youngest, the only one, and yet someone identical to me had been living just 5 blocks away. I froze, staring at the paper. My grandmother chatted happily about her memories, completely oblivious to the shock coursing through me. Michael's hand squeezed mine, grounding me, but I could barely hear him. All I could think was, why? Why would they hide this? How could they live knowing this secret and never tell me? I remember my chest tightening, a mix of anger, disbelief, and curiosity bubbling up at the same time. My mind raced through every birthday, every family dinner, every moment I'd ever felt like I didn't fully belong. And suddenly, it all made sense. Or at least pieces of a puzzle I didn't know existed started clicking into place. I tried to stay calm, forcing a smile while the party went on around me. But inside, I was already plotting. I had to find her. I needed to meet her. I needed answers. And in that moment, I knew life as I had known it was over. Little did I realize that was just the beginning of the nightmare and the reckoning. I couldn't wait a single day. The thought of her being so close, living just a few blocks away while my parents kept her existence a secret, felt like a betrayal I couldn't ignore. Michael tried to reason with me. He said, "Maybe we should think this through. What if she doesn't want to meet you? What if this opens up things you're not ready for?" But I couldn't listen. My curiosity, my anger, my need for answers, it was overwhelming. I grabbed my phone and started piecing together clues from the family tree. There were initials, old addresses, little notes my grandmother had scribbled in the margins. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start searching. Walking through the neighborhood felt surreal. Every house looked the same, yet suddenly every door could be hiding my twin. I kept imagining what she would look like. Would she be angry? Confused? Maybe even resentful that her existence had been erased by the very people who were supposed to love her? Finally, after a few hours of walking and asking discreet questions, I found her, or at least the house where she lived. My heart pounded as I stood at the door. I ran through what I might say 100 times. "Hi, I think we're sisters," sounded ridiculous when I said it aloud. I rang the doorbell. My hands were shaking so badly I thought she might hear it. The door opened slowly, and there she was, my twin, standing in front of me, blinking in surprise. She looked like me. Same eyes, same faint curve of the smile, but there was a strength in her stance that I recognized as mine too, though I had never met her. She froze, staring at me like I was a ghost. She said, Who are you?" Voice cautious. I said, I think I'm your sister. my voice trembling. "My parents, they never told me about you." Her eyes widened even more, and for a moment, silence stretched between us, heavy and impossible. Then slowly she stepped aside and gestured for me to come in. She said, I've wondered about this," she admitted quietly, "but I never thought. I didn't think they'd actually hide me." As I walked inside, a flood of emotions hit me: relief, fear, anticipation. She led me to the living room, and we sat across from each other, staring, trying to absorb the reality of what was happening. I wanted to ask everything at once, but I held back. She was cautious. I had to respect that. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. She said, "I've known about some of the things they've done," she whispered, almost like it was a confession. I didn't have proof, and I didn't know if anyone would believe me. In that moment, I realized we weren't just discovering each other. We were uncovering decades of lies. And together, we could do something about it. But I had no idea just how far this reckoning would go or how explosive it would become. We sat there for what felt like hours, talking in whispers, trying to make sense of everything. Her name was Emily, my twin. It still felt strange saying it out loud, as if the word itself could make this secret real. She told me bits and pieces she had learned over the years, things my parents had done to cover her existence, how they had manipulated situations so she never got close to anyone in the family. She said, "It's like I was invisible to them. I grew up just a few streets away, thinking I was alone, and all this time you were out there living the life I was supposed to have." I reached across the table and grabbed her hand. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "I had no idea. I don't blame you for being angry. I'd be furious too." She shook her head. "No, it's not your fault. But we have to do something. We can't just let them keep lying to everyone." I felt a thrill of determination, a spark of what I now realize was the beginning of my plan. For the first time, I could see clearly. My parents weren't untouchable. They had built this image of perfection, controlling the narrative for decades. But now we had a chance to take it away. We talked strategy, quietly, carefully. We couldn't just storm into the house and accuse them without proof. We needed witnesses, evidence, a way to expose them so there was no denying it. Emily shared stories I had never heard about my parents' favoritism toward my older siblings, how they had manipulated inheritances, even small cruelties that left scars I hadn't noticed as a child. Every story fueled my anger. Every detail made the betrayal feel heavier. And yet, there was also a strange comfort in having her here, someone who knew the truth, someone I could trust completely. We decided to start gathering evidence, old letters, photographs, anything that could confirm what we suspected. Michael was a cautious voice in my ear, reminding me to stay calm, to think through each step. But Emily and I were in sync. We both wanted the same thing, a reckoning. As I left her house that evening, I looked back once and I realized something chilling. My parents had spent decades hiding her existence, but they had no idea that we were already planning our move. And I knew, in my gut, that the first confrontation was going to be explosive. The next morning, I couldn't eat, couldn't focus, couldn't stop thinking about my parents. Every memory from my childhood replayed in my mind. Birthdays where I felt invisible, moments of unexplained favoritism toward my older siblings, the subtle manipulations that had shaped my life. And now, Emily and I had a key to it all. We spent the day comparing notes, piecing together decades of secrets. Emily had scraps of letters, old photographs, and even a few financial documents my parents had mistakenly left lying around. I had memories, small confessions my grandmother had made over the years, and a sense of timing that only someone raised in this family could understand. Together, we were unstoppable. She always liked him better, Emily said suddenly, nodding toward my father in one of the old photos. Do you remember how he got that scholarship we both applied for, and she acted like it was no big deal? I clenched my fists. I never understood why. It always felt unfair. Now I see it clearly. We laughed bitterly, but it was a dangerous, tense kind of laughter, the kind that comes when injustice finally gets recognized. I realized we had more than just curiosity. We had fuel. And fuel, I knew, could burn down everything in its path. By mid-afternoon, we made a plan. We would confront my parents at dinner, not quietly, not behind closed doors, but publicly, with everyone who mattered present. Siblings, relatives, neighbors, even a few neighbors who had witnessed my parents' favoritism or small manipulations over the years. We wanted them exposed in a way they couldn't spin, couldn't gaslight, couldn't undo. Michael raised an eyebrow when I mentioned it. Are you sure about this? This isn't just a family argument. This is going nuclear? I know, I said, my voice calm but firm. But for the first time in my life, I can't just sit back. They've held power over everything, over us, over the narrative, over the truth. That ends tonight. We spent the evening quietly gathering more evidence, old birthday cards, photographs where Emily should have appeared, small notes my grandmother had kept hidden in drawers. Every piece we collected made the plan feel more real, more satisfying. But even as excitement bubbled inside me, a small voice of doubt whispered, what if this broke the family? What if they reacted violently? Could I handle the fallout? I pushed the thought aside. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming the truth. And once I had that, nothing could stop me. When I finally went to bed that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining the dinner table, my parents' faces when the first truth hit, and Emily sitting beside me triumphant. I knew that by tomorrow evening, nothing would ever be the same. Little did I know, the first spark of confrontation would ignite more than just anger. It would awaken secrets even we hadn't anticipated. The next morning, Emily and I set out with one goal: gather allies. We couldn't take on our parents alone, not if we wanted the truth to hit hard, to leave no room for denial. So we made a list: siblings who might side with us, cousins who had always sensed favoritism, even a few neighbors who had quietly witnessed my parents' favoritism or small manipulations over the years. By the end of the day, we had a small army of witnesses ready to see the truth laid bare. Michael watched all of this with a mix of admiration and concern. He said, "You're turning this into a war. Are you sure about this?" And necessary, no, but deserved, absolutely. For too long, they've controlled everything, lied about everything, and treated us like pawns. Tonight, the table flips. As evening approached, Emily and I went over the evidence again. Letters, photographs, small documents that proved favoritism, neglect, and hidden manipulations. Every detail carefully organized. We even practiced how we would present it, making sure the truth landed with impact. By the time I arrived at my parents' house for the dinner, my heart was pounding. The family had started arriving, the table was set, and my parents were calm, as if nothing was about to happen. But I could feel it in the air, the tension, the anticipation. And I knew that by the time the night was over, nothing would ever be the same. I took a deep breath and whispered to Emily, "Ready?" She nodded, a small, confident smile on her face, more than ever. And just like that, the calm before the storm was over. The dinner began like any other family gathering. Polite smiles, small talk, clinking glasses. My parents moved through the room with their usual air of control, unaware of the storm about to hit them. My siblings laughed nervously at some harmless joke, cousins exchanged glances, and the neighbors I had invited watched quietly from their seats, sensing something unusual in the energy. I sat next to Emily, feeling a strange mixture of excitement and nervousness. She gave me a tiny nod, our silent signal. Everything was in place. For the first half hour, the conversation stayed light. My mother chatted about recipes, my father offered a few anecdotes from his youth, and I smiled politely, all the while keeping my hand close to the pile of letters and photographs we had brought. Then I slid the family tree across the table. The room went silent. My mother's hands froze midair, my father's fork clattered against his plate, and even my older siblings stopped talking. Everyone's eyes went to the yellowed paper in front of them, and for a moment, it felt like time itself had stopped. "This," I said, my voice calm but firm, "is something I just discovered today, and it changes everything you thought you knew about this family." My mother's face paled, and she opened her mouth, then closed it again. My father's jaw tightened, and he avoided eye contact with me. I continued, feeling a wave of power I hadn't felt before. I found out that I have a twin, someone who's been living just a few blocks away and who my parents never told me about. Gasps and whispers filled the room. My siblings stared at each other, confusion and shock painted across their faces. Emily leaned forward, calm and composed, and said, "I am that twin." And for decades, they tried to erase my existence. My mother opened her mouth again, this time to protest, but no one listened. The room was electric with tension. The first domino had fallen, and I knew the next moves would be even more explosive. I caught Michael's eye across the table, and he gave me a tiny smile. Approval, support, awe. We had taken the first step, and there was no turning back. But even as I spoke, I realized my parents were already plotting their own moves. Subtle, manipulative, desperate. This was far from over. The room felt electric, almost suffocating. Every eye was on my parents, waiting for their reaction. My mother opened her mouth, tried to speak, but her words stumbled over each other. That's not true. You're making this up. There's no proof." I smiled faintly, sliding a stack of letters, photographs, and old documents across the table. "Proof," I said calmly. "Here it is. Everything you thought you could hide." My father cleared his throat, trying to regain control, but even he looked unsettled. This is exaggerated," he muttered, eyes darting to my siblings for support. But the room wasn't on their side anymore. Cousins whispered to each other, neighbors leaned forward, and my older sister's face had gone pale. Emily spoke, her voice firm and unwavering. "For years, you manipulated situations, favored some, ignored others, and even erased me from your family story. We have proof now. No more lies." The tension was unbearable. My mother's hand shook as she tried to reach for a letter, but I moved it slightly out of reach. "You've spent decades controlling the narrative," I said. "Tonight, that ends. Everyone here can see the truth." Whispers turned into murmurs, murmurs into gasps. Some relatives looked shocked, others incredulous, but no one argued with the evidence in front of them. For the first time, my parents weren't in control. The room belonged to us. Michael reached over, squeezing my hand. I felt a surge of vindication. Every slight, every hidden manipulation, every lie my parents told led to this moment. And now, they were powerless. My mother finally shouted, "You don't understand! We did what was best!" I leaned forward, eyes locked on hers. "What was best for you, maybe, not for us." Emily's voice joined mine, steady and fierce. "You hid me. You tried to erase my life.
And you lied about her too, all these years. Look around. Everyone can see who's telling the truth now. My father opened his mouth to speak, then closed it. My siblings exchanged uneasy glances. The relatives murmured among themselves, some nodding quietly, others glaring at my parents. And in that moment, I realized it wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming our family, our voices, and our story. But even as we celebrated this small victory, I felt a chill. My mother's eyes were sharp, calculating, and I knew she wasn't finished. She had one last move, and it was coming. After the initial shock, the room settled into an uncomfortable tension. My parents slumped in their chairs, silent now, but their anger and panic simmered just beneath the surface. My siblings whispered nervously to each other, unsure which side to take, and the cousins and neighbors looked between us, witnessing a family unravel in real time. Emily and I exchanged a glance, a mix of triumph and caution. We knew the battle wasn't fully won. My mother in particular was dangerous when cornered. She had spent decades manipulating everyone around her, and I could see her mind working, calculating how to spin this. "I can't believe you would do this," my mother finally said, her voice trembling, eyes darting around the table. "You're tearing the family apart for what? For some imagined grievance?" I felt a flash of anger, but I held it back. Calm was more powerful than shouting. "No, Mother," I said, steadily. "We're tearing apart the lies. You've built this perfect family image on deception, favoritism, and manipulation. Tonight, it ends."
My father looked pained, guilty even, but he still tried to intervene. "It's not that simple," he murmured. "You're overreacting." But no one was listening to him. The evidence lay on the table, undeniable, and for the first time in decades, the truth was louder than their excuses. Emily recounted stories from her childhood, small incidents my parents had brushed aside, moments of favoritism, letters where they tried to erase her from the family record. I could see some of the relatives shifting in their seats, realizing that we weren't exaggerating. Some whispered supportively, others simply stared, stunned. Then my mother's eyes flashed with something I hadn't seen in years, desperation, but also defiance. "You think you've won," she hissed under her breath, but loud enough for me to hear. "You don't know everything." A chill ran down my spine. I knew she had one last secret, one last card to play, something powerful enough to shake even us. And I realized that even with all the proof, even with all the witnesses, the story wasn't over yet. But for the first time, the fear was ours to wield. The balance of power had shifted, and my parents were exposed. And yet, a part of me braced for a revelation I didn't yet know. One final bomb, one last betrayal was coming, and it would change everything. Just when I thought the tension had reached its peak, my mother leaned forward, her eyes sharp and calculating. The room went silent again, sensing the storm about to break. "You think this is all you need to know?" she said slowly, her voice low but cutting. "There are things you don't understand, things that go deeper than your little discoveries." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Emily and I exchanged a glance. We knew this could be dangerous, but we also knew we couldn't back down now. She picked up a folded envelope from the table, one I hadn't noticed before, and held it up. "This," she said, "is the truth about your inheritance, about the way I've protected this family's legacy. And now you've gone and ruined it." A cold shiver ran down my spine. She opened it slowly, revealing documents that hinted at decades of financial manipulation. My parents had been controlling every asset, every property,
every inheritance, keeping us in the dark. And some of it even implicated Emily's rightful claims. Emily's eyes widened. You lied to me? All these years? She whispered, disbelief written across her face. I did what I had to, my mother said, almost casually, but her eyes were wild with anger. You two have no idea what it takes to keep a family like this together. I made decisions to protect everyone, including you. I felt a rush of fury, but I kept my voice calm. Protect us? By lying to us? By erasing a life? By stealing what's rightfully ours? The room was silent except for the quiet hum of tension. My parents slumped in their chairs, exhausted from the confrontation, defeated in a way I had never seen them before. My siblings looked confused, some ashamed, some quietly relieved. The cousins and neighbors who had witnessed everything now understood the full truth. I glanced at Emily and she gave me a small, victorious smile. For the first time, I felt what it was like to be truly seen, not as the youngest, the overlooked daughter, or the one who had never mattered, but as a person who had a voice, a story, and a twin who shared it. Michael reached over and squeezed my hand. You did it, he whispered, and I realized he was right. We had taken control, not with anger alone, but with the truth. That was more powerful than any scream or accusation could ever be. My mother tried one last time to regain her composure. This isn't over, she said, her voice tight with suppressed fury. I looked at her calmly. Maybe not, but tonight the table belongs to us, and for once, you're powerless to stop it. We spent the rest of the evening talking, quietly, carefully, about what had happened. There were tears, yes, some mine, some Emily's, and even a few from relatives who had felt the weight of the lies all along. But there was also relief, a sense that the family, fractured though it now was, had finally spoken the truth. Emily and I sat side by side as the night wound down, feeling a bond that had been missing our entire lives. I realized that revenge, in the way we had enacted it, wasn't about cruelty or malice. It was about justice, about reclaiming what had been stolen, our stories, our identities, and our place in the family. As we left the house, I looked back at my parents sitting at the table, stunned and silent. A part of me felt pity for them, for all the years they had wasted controlling and lying instead of loving. But mostly I felt relief. Relief that the truth was finally out, that my twin and I were together, and that we had taken our first steps towards our own lives, free from their shadow. I squeezed Emily's hand, and she looked at me, eyes shining. This is only the beginning, she whispered. And I knew she was right. We had reclaimed our past, but now we could shape our future together, stronger, and unafraid. For the first time in my life, the family table was ours, and no one could take it away.